One of my greatest moments of insight in prison in Belarus came on losing a chess game. I'm not a great chess player, but I'm quite proud. And Sergey, immigrant trafficker, was laughing at me. He'd beaten me. And I suddenly felt all of the pain, all of the failures and shortfalls, how trapped I was, how hopeless it was, and a kind of hot, panicky desire to be anywhere but where I was set in. It was kind of like feeling 5 years old and being at some function that you have to be at and really, really wanting to go home, really, really wanting to be picked up and taken home by your mum. That was how I felt on losing this chess game. But then I kind of decomposed it, and no one likes losing or being laughed at. But this micro situation was wired up to much bigger topics. I was feeling much bigger sensations than simply the humiliating loss of a chess game. And I realized not just that I should, but that I could separate things out, that I should engage with one topic at a time, own the reality of how I felt for sure, but not let backdoor circuitry dictate how I felt about it all on behalf of the sensations of this specific situation. And I went to bed beaming that day. I felt like I got myself more than I'd ever done before. Kind of like I'd caught some frisbee in the dark when I'd never even been able to make out the outline of it before. And I just sort of got that I had an ability to choose who I was and how I responded to things. It's been really confusing to work out how to explain this story to people. And I think that's for two main reasons. One is that lots of people on the outside were following some Cold War thriller that involved all these wild characters and heroism and community and love. And then there was actually what it was like for me inside. And those are two quite separate things, but it's obviously part of one big story. And so to work out how to give people what they want to hear, a story essentially, while at the same time doing justice to what it was for me, is something I find very tricky. And secondly, none of it made that much sense. I'd be lying to myself, and I think we're all lying to ourselves in a way to make out that there's a narrative logic to how life goes for each of us. I look back through my diaries and see that it was 100 different things at once, 100 different stories and plot lines and things to disentangle. But I figured there does need to be something that adds context to why I now think of myself in a position to ask people who've been incarcerated to explain themselves. And this will attempt to be that. This is The Mirror in My Cell. So, me and my girlfriend at the time had gone on a short holiday to Poland. I had convinced her it would be interesting to extend the trip by a day and visit Belarus. I had studied some Russian at school. I thought it would be interesting. She kind of agreed with me. We had brought some marijuana with us, and we had intended to leave that in our hire car and not bring it to Belarus. That marijuana got misplaced. It ended up in the front pocket of my purple raincoat. And we were obviously quite different looking from most of the other people crossing between the Polish and Belarusian border. And we attracted a special degree of interest from the border guards. I got arrested. I didn't really believe it at first. I didn't really know what was happening or how to make sense of it. I couldn't really process that they were serious. I felt like I understood the paradox of stillness, living on a planet that spins at 10,000 miles an hour whilst having that little pouch of marijuana looking up at me. I was all over the place, but it was also kind of fascinated as well. They decided that I would go to trial, and it wasn't initially clear which article I was going to be charged under, but over the course of the next couple of weeks, that turned out to be part 2 of Article 328, which prescribed a sentence of between 3 and 7 years in prison. When I look back and think about how I had been living before Belarus, I don't think I was happy. I don't think life was adding up for me. And the more I think about it, the more I realize it was what lots of people are experiencing at the moment. Both suffused with some of the biggest questions of our time, but at the same time, completely self-referential. And I didn't feel like I understood myself or how I was supposed to be living, or clarity about what I was for, what was I good for. And certainly not that I was doing a good job of being me. I think I was even angry at myself because I had like a really nice job. I was in a really interesting part of the world, had more freedom and more dimensions than most people throughout history have ever had, beautiful friends. But with all of that, still didn't really feel right. And now I'm in the fucking ground in Belarus. The room is barely bigger than me, tiny underground. There's no natural light coming in. There's no running water, and these kind of like chemical lights are on through the night with these horrible permanent shadows cast. And I'm there with this great bloated guy with these doodle-like tattoos who's tried to kill himself. And then this sad gothy music teacher who's beat his girlfriend and being turned in by her mum. His sweatshirt said, "Don't hurt with my princess," in English on it. I'm feeling like some kind of documentarian brought to have a look at how it's all going without initially understanding that I was one of the prisoners in this place. And then I moved to CESO. That's the pre-trial detention center. It's slowly dawning on me, but at the same time, I'm maintaining this kind of like aloof energy on the whole place, which is elevated when I realize how many of the people that I'm going to be spending time with are political prisoners as well. Now they've got these yellow placards hung from their bed. Half the people in my first room had these cards hanging from their beds, which if anything has the effect of hoisting me even further from it being like my world or my situation. And I think because of the headspace I was in from my previous life, where something had needed to change for really such a long time, and I felt so powerless to do that, I got very quickly on that it could be some type of opportunity. I think I knew like straight away it's going to be a crazy story, and I had this, wow, this is like, wait till the guys hear about this one, on to see myself under a type of magnifying glass, or more, maybe more accurate to say, see myself seeing myself under a magnifying glass, and know that it's time to act as if this is important. The routine was wake up, shave, porridge, roll call, go for a walk, have lunch, admin, dinner, roll call, bed, sleep. And then we did it again. Oleg was the most intellectual of my first cellmates probably, and he took on the task of explaining the routines, culture and logic of the place we'd found ourselves in. You will just need to learn the rules, he said. He was in prison because he had subscribed to an independent journalist on his phone on YouTube. No one anticipated that they would be found innocent, and instead anticipated that there were going to be much more stringent and ruthless conventions to follow down the line in big prison, which meant that we were preemptively adhering to all of these protocols, which was incredibly stressful for me because I didn't understand anything, and Oleg was the only one who could explain anything in English to me. So I'm both comprehending what this means on a bigger life level for me, and then also scrambling to understand how I'm supposed to be living in this little box room. I'm trying to learn a bit of Russian. I'm probably like 2 weeks in, and they've delivered enough scary looking pieces of paper with Belarusian coats of arms on that I realized it's not a joke. And my English speaking lawyers, having made contact with my parents, have indicated that this is not, it's not a joke. I kind of attribute this significance to this time. Struck by the sense that I'm maybe here for a purpose, or there's a reason behind it. And I spend an afternoon writing in big, fancy, embellished letters in this notebook that I have. I will leave when I know why, urging myself to see it as some mission, some journey to find my purpose or something. And I'm struck by the sense that it's this big moment where I find the reason that I'm supposed to be me. I've started writing a diary. I start trying to do a bit of yoga, much to the bemusement of my cellmates. I start doing some press-ups, which is more acceptable to them. In normal life, it felt like there was so much mess and noise. No single thought or sensation has time to breathe because of all the other thoughts and sensations that are fighting for space. And suddenly I'm able to appreciate and be grateful for things I never would have been able to before, like the cold water coming in through taps, seeing the silhouettes of the trees outside, being gifted a crunchy apple from one of my cellmates. And I'm looking around and I'm seeing people that are maybe next going to see their kids in 7 years' time, whose kids think they're on a business trip in Africa. There's people who've taken pictures of a protest, been at a protest, given some money to a charity, and are now thinking they're going to spend 5, 6, 7 years in prison. And I'm just thinking about how good my life is, just looking back and knowing how much richness and love there had been for such a long time in my life. And I kind of scrub it out, that thing which I wrote in that book, like, I'll leave when I know why. And I realized actually I had the sense that I would leave when I knew how. It felt less about having a purpose and more about knowing how to live life well. And that didn't feel like something that needed to wait until I'd left to be realized, but that was actually something that was available straight away for me. I think that had been something that I'd been neglecting for a long time, realizing that if I could just do one day well, if I could just do 5 minutes well, then probably everything else would fall into place. And I'd been way too preoccupied by bigger, juicier, more intellectual conversations of who I was and how the world should and could be. And it was then really nice to take on some smaller, humbler goals than those I deemed myself worthy of in the outside world. Nothing was as messy here. Even with the tangle of good and evil, us the evil ones and them the good ones apparently. It was so nice to give up on sense and logic and abstract nouns and just do what felt clear would make my life better. I decided to eat as much food as I could, eat as much leftover porridge as there was for me. I knew I needed to learn Russian. Life is probably going to be simpler if I can do more press-ups, and maybe I'll be happy if I can write a poem that rhymes in the way that I want it to. And so Christmas is approaching, New Year is approaching, and I've kind of got this situation where I'm almost like doing A/B testing. It's the idea that you change such minor variables that you become confident in the relationships between those variables and the rest of reality. Nothing is changing, and I have so much capacity to observe myself. I see what's actually happening to me. And I get on in the name of these goals and working out what impact that has on how I feel about myself, how I feel about life. And I'm so surprised at the room that creates for happy spontaneity, dancing, laughing, telling stories, learning from people, compassion for the boys around me. We were blessed enough to be able to listen to Radio Gorod FM for most days. A lot of terrible Russian, Belarusian pop, but occasionally there would be some tasty bangers that came on. I did a lot of dancing. That was a release I had become accustomed to living in Berlin, and thankfully Radio Gorod FM scratched the itch for me occasionally. And I would be freaking out, especially Funky Town. I think that was one of the key songs that played a role in my time in Belarus. But I remember there was another one of the characters in the second cell that I was in. He was like a fast food worker, but had ended up being framed as a conniving political actor. He really, really wasn't. I don't think I've ever met anyone less political than this chap. But he was early 20s and quite repressed in more ways than one. One day we were both just dancing to Funky Town together and realizing that I had this effect on him through the space that I had let myself be in. It was such a nice feeling, having seen him at such low points, and then also seeing him. Yeah, it looked like he was dancing for the first time in some ways. But that was all possible because of that headspace. I managed to navigate myself to. Of course, there's going to be the struggles and conflicts of what any group of people in one place is, or this micro society. But I just did a better job of seeing that and asking how I wanted to be amongst that. There was fucking things up and pissing people off and getting on people's nerves. But I'm holding on to the part where I say, who do I want to be through this? What are actually my objectives? And how can I move closer to that within this situation? Let myself feel the things I need to feel. Don't talk myself out of the reality of my experience. Own it and then move forwards. I would need to go and cry in the corner at times, sat on a bucket away from the cellmates under the coats and outside the range of those blinky Chinese cameras. And I allowed myself it, both the moments where the tears needed to come out and the moments when I also just needed to tell myself it was okay to be feeling the things I was feeling. Allowed to be pissed or scared or confused, even at the thoughts and experiences which had happened way before Belarus. I let myself feel it all, and it was the first step of saying, well, what next? And feeling like I was on my own team was a huge part of actually being able to listen to myself and act in the ways that I asked myself to act. There were definitely some moments where I needed to talk myself out of impulsive behavior. I remember I decided I wanted to steal the prosecutor's pen at one point as I was being interrogated, just to one-up him, just to kind of like take out some anger on the higher plane of what was happening to me, but doing that in quite a misguided and stupid way. So I managed to talk myself down from that one. And the time where I scratched the words ACAB into the wall of a cell that I was being held in, before again realizing that it was maybe smarter to not allow that to be my mechanism of protest. And Christmas comes around, New Year comes around, and I think on the 6th of January I get a letter from my family. Everything has to go through a censor, and the censor doesn't speak English. So all these letters have to be in Russian. And at this point, I probably am getting like 10% of what this Russian Google translated letter is trying to communicate to me. And my brother's talking about his plans for the year. I'm hearing about how the family Christmas has gone. And I'm feeling for the first time, not that I'm stuck somewhere, but that I am not somewhere. And suddenly imagining all of the time that's going to have passed, all of the people and phenomena that I'll have missed. I'll be in my 30s, how will life have moved on, how will everyone's life have moved on. And through this time, I've been kind of quite confident that I'm one of the most interesting things in my family and friends' life. But suddenly I see a life where they are the most interesting things about my life, and I'm just stuck in a cupboard for 3 or more years. And I'm scared because I know that the part where it gets normal and boring is harder than when it's hard, because it doesn't require a great feat of resilience or humanity or bravery to exist. Then it's just boring. On the 17th of January, I got out after a diplomatic intervention. I paid 10,000 euros to be free in a maneuver that would have been unavailable to anybody else in that prison. Now it's the normal part, and no one's watching. There's no magnifying glass or precariousness or quietness in life, and I'm still working out what to do about it. There was lots of me that I liked in there, and I want to make sure that the foundations of that person are secure before I do anything too wild with myself. I'm hoping that this project is going to be a reminder for me who that person was and how he wanted to exist. And because of the inspiring people that I met in Belarus, because of how I've seen people channel themselves and reflect on themselves, contend with the greatest of challenges and injustices, I know that there's going to be people with beautiful, powerful stories that I am desperate to find out as well. I look forward to sharing them with you and continuing the journey of being our best selves together. This has been The Mirror in My Cell. Thanks for listening to that origin story episode of The Mirror in My Cell. I think the other conversations I've had are a bit more dynamic than that one. The first of which I'm putting out available now, a conversation with Hannah Kumar, who was also imprisoned in Belarus for a time, albeit for slightly more noble reasons than I. If you enjoy the project, I'll be posting around every 10 days. I decided on every day with a 4 in it, so the next one being on the 24th of this month. You can get in touch with me on mirrorinmycell@gmail.com, especially to suggest people to speak to. I hope you have a great day.